we go. Hey guys, what's up?
Okay, can we hear you? Can you hear us?
You sound perfect right now. Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very good.
And it's only showing one. I know there are other, but it'll minimize that screen. So
Okay.
you have part of the screen.
Sure thing.
Okay, I think want to start. We have our attention.
Sure thing. Yeah. Michael, did you want to introduce the company? Say a couple things. There's that mic right there.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for spending your afternoon with us, Phase Engineering. How many people here have seen us once before? Half of it. Okay, so there's some new people. So let me give you a quick introduction about Phase. We are a full-service environmental firm, consulting firm, for the last 31 years here in Texas. We are in every major city in Texas, and we also cover all of Texas and surrounding states. So if you do have a property, let's say in Louisiana or Arkansas or Oklahoma, we can take care of that as well. But primarily we're here in Houston. This is our headquarters. Again, we've been here 31 years. Ross here has been here for a little over 23 years now.
Mm-hmm.
So he's encountered it all. He can answer all your questions. For people who were here once before in January, as Claire said, Ross went over what an ESA is and why you might need it. My next question to you is really, I'm curious about how many of y'all have encountered, needing a phase one or any kind of environmental consulting before? Here, everybody? Okay, great. That's good, because last class was a great class. Y'all were very engaged and had a lot of questions. This man over here really gets excited when you are engaged and ask questions. So I implore you to, dive in. Don't be scared. He's happy to answer your questions. So this time around, 2.0, as Claire has coined it, we are going to dive into a little further in depth about making you almost a scientist, investigator. You're going to be able to give, like a preliminary assessment before an actual formal condition report would go into your property. So we're going to basically give you some insight on what to look for, and then maybe have some questions for me that I can relay back to Ross, and he can answer them. He's a busy man, so please hit me up first, and I'll get him back to you as quickly as possible. A little background on Ross. He's, again, been here for 23 years, and he's seen it all for a lot, I like to say. I don't think anybody's ever stumped him in quite some time on questions or anything. But with that said, he is the VP of Operations, and I would love for everybody to give him a warm welcome as he's about to encounter the next 2 hours of informing you on what you need to know, what's coming up. So please, everybody give a warm welcome to Ross, Dr. Ross, please, from Phase Engineering. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all again. It was a great experience last time, so hope this time is the same. I don't have a formal presentation. I'm going to be going over a bunch of information though, and I was hoping that along the way you might have some questions, or if something, if I missed something or you need me to go back and repeat, just let me know. I'm here to kind of give you, like Michael said, a training course in preliminary evaluation. So, whenever you get some kind of health symptom and you get on Google and you start Googling everything about it and become an interim doctor to try to figure out what your symptoms are, even though your doctors have all probably told you not to. That's kind of what we're doing, but hopefully I'll give you some measures to make a little bit more informed decision, or provide your clients with more information moving into a deal, whether or not you're representing the buyer or the seller. So, for a few different reasons, which I'll get into, which might be helpful. And at any given time in before your deal starts. I'm always open to questions about a property or a issue that might be occurring. So you'll have my phone number and contact information. We'll distribute that throughout after, and I'm always available for questions anyways. So I'll get started here. Again, the purpose is to educate non-environmental professionals, primarily real estate professionals here, how to tentatively identify potential environmental concerns prior to execution of a contract or leading up to some type of real estate transaction. So some things that you can look at to become more well-informed. The objectives are to understand the importance of key knowledge related to environmental concerns and the reasons this information is valuable at the outset of a real estate transaction. And the next objective is to have the ability to vet third-party environmental reports to determine accuracy or even question the completeness of that work that's presented by the consultant in their findings, opinions, or conclusions, and see how if the justification they used is accurate or not. And that's to limit liabilities or burdens that could exist after the deal's closed. And then the third objective is to understand the key roles that each of the publicly available resource information plays and how effectively to use and apply them. And if we have time, we'll get into some examples or some other profiles if we can. But I'm gonna bring up a set of aerials first, and I'm gonna bring up this site. It's an infamous site, and I'll tell you what it is in a few minutes when we get to it. And it also it has a lot of environmental significance. So I'm trying to get this. I'm logged into the computer for the first time, so just bear with me while I get where I need to get to. There we go. So I'm going to bring you to this site, and this is going to be some significance here. This is up near Niagara Falls, New York. Has anyone been to Niagara Falls here? Yeah. No. Okay. Has anyone taken a environmental class at all? Maybe? No. Okay. Well, then this is all gonna be new. Good. I don't want to. So this is a site that I'm talking about. It's right here with this blue line running through it. So that was the site in 1948. This is on the American side, yes. This was the site in 1901. It was in a outskirt of Niagara Falls called LaSalle. There wasn't much going on in 1901, but by 1948, there was a good amount going on, right? So the land just occurred, and then this feature showed up, and the feature maintained for a bit of time. I'll take you through some time machine on this one. This is 1958, and then moving to 1965. This pops up. Can anyone guess what the symbol means? Right here. Oh, I'm sorry. Right here. This flag right here. This is a school. So it went from nothing, it went from a ditch to a school. And then that school continued to maintain on that property for quite some time. The aerials that I had opened before. Here we go. This is the same site right here. This is where the school was. This is 1953. Moving forward, this is 1962. The school's here, some houses popped up right here and here. This is skewed, so north is kind of diagonal, but north is this way, south is this way, same property. This is a school, 1972. I'm continuing on in the mid-70s, it's still here. And by 1995, this is the property right here. That's where the school was sitting. Disappeared. And then 2002, it's just a big grass field with a building here. Kind of, sort of. And then it's just this dirty mess here in 2016. Roadway looking features, but not really. And then 2024. There's a whole point to this. I'm not just going into Never Never Land here. But this was a significant property. So the main issue here was in fact where was it? There we go. This canal that had shown up and disappeared. That happened. That was a big mystery. No, especially for the people who built the school and all the residents that lived in the neighborhood. So this is an infamous site. This is the first Superfund site that ever existed. It's called Love Canal. All right. This is what all of the environmental regulations that we deal with nowadays, as far as due diligence and evaluation. This is the origin of it. So I'll go through a slideshow for you. In the late 1800s, a guy by the name of William T. Love bought the land during a huge land sale, and he was going to create a big canal. He had huge plans for it. He was going to create a dam and a hydroelectric station and a bunch of other things, and he was going to create this place called Paradise Falls. And he went bankrupt, and Tesla developed the electric current that you could put on power lines and transport. So his idea of creating a hydroelectric project from nothing, he spent millions back then, which would equate to hundreds of millions nowadays, digging this canal for something that no one was ever going to use. So then it just became an open earth pit. And he lost the land. The Naira County took over the land and divvied it up. It's actually this part right here, this whole thing. So if 99th Street on this side, all the way over here. Yeah, and up to this property here. What William T. Love wanted to do, I know this is small, but there's a water way up on the north. And he wanted to connect this waterway to the Niagara River. That was his plan. So he didn't get very far. He spent over a decade having people dig it out, and it was bedrock and all sorts of stuff that was difficult to work with. So, so this is a summary of it. William T. Love tried to dig the canal. Here's the property in 1938. If you can see it. That's the canal, but actually just a big hole in the ground actually at that point. This was a critical point in time, 1938. That what was happening in 1938? Fixing to go into war. The US wasn't in war yet, but we were preparing for it. So we were creating, we were developing weapons and creating arms. And Niagara Falls is actually one of the leading chemical producing areas in the country, and they were producing chemicals that went into weaponry, chlorinated chemicals. So at this point in time, a company named Hooker Chemical used this to dump all their waste in. They bought the property from Niagara County. Got it for nothing because no one wanted it. It was just full mosquitoes and rodents and whatever else. It was a nuisance to everyone around, so they took over the property. And people actually swam in that. Because it was close to the Niagara River. Everyone just decided to you know, get as much recreation as they could, I guess. And any swimming hole they went into, if it had water, and you jumped in it back then, I guess. There was a huge mixing pot of chemicals. They found at least 80 different chemicals. Now, back when they first started investigating it in the late 1970s, the laboratories were limited anyways. They couldn't, and they only knew about certain compounds. Today, there's more than 235 compounds identified in that pit. The Board of Education purchased the property from the Hooker Chemical Company in '53 for $1. They thought that they were getting steel. The area residents knew what was going on there. They saw the trucks going in every night, and they were and they saw the fires break out from time to time from the volatile chemicals, and they knew, but no one was interviewing people around back in those days, before properties were being acquired. They were just blowing and going, and they were buying what they could. Once the pit was filled up, Hooker had no use for the land, really, so they just covered it up. I don't know if they tried to sell it otherwise before they sold it to the Board of Education, but that occurred at some point. And there's this famous deed that I found that was the sale from Niagara County. 1953, it was Hooker Chemical Company, Board of Education for $1. Well, that's the problem. That's why I have a job nowadays, because no one researched properties back then. You assumed whatever you agreed to assume, right? This is 1953. There was no EPA. There was no Toxic Substance Control Board. There was nothing. Some of the states and counties had public health departments. Environmental health was different as well, but most of that had to do with sanitation. But Hooker Chemical, they thought they got off the hook, no pun intended, by putting the statement in the deed. I'll read it. Prior to delivery of this instrument of conveyance, the grantee herein has advised by the grantor that the premises above described have been filled in whole or in part to the present grade level thereof with waste products resulting from the manufacturing of chemicals by the grantor at its plant in the city of Niagara Falls, New York, and the grantee assumes all risk and liability incident to the use thereof. So it's the school's problem now. It's not Hooker's problem anymore. Should have been a flag. The school thought they were getting a deal, and they didn't. They thought, oh, it's been covered up, and we can't see it. So let's go build on it. Leaches into everything, and it volatilizes and degasses up into buildings. And oh yeah, oh yeah, the Niagara River is not a clean river. It's still seeping in today. So not that we want that to happen, but this is 1960. You see the school kind of in the middle here. Now, the neighborhood had been developing since right after 53. Houses were starting to be put up. It was a great neighborhood. You had this big green space in the middle, or vacant space. It wasn't really green after a while. Lots of area for your kids to play in, and a school right there. You didn't have to drive to school. There was no school line or car line. It was just Paradise Falls. So, but it started showing signs of degradation. In the 60s and 70s, there started to be a string of complaints, sinkholes, skin rashes. They didn't do a geotechnical investigation either. So that was a problem. And yeah, sparking rocks. The kids in the playground thought it was cool because you could hit two rocks together and there was a flame that came out of it. The teachers and educators didn't think anything of it. And the dogs and cats didn't fare very well either. They didn't have a very good pet population in that neighborhood, but they didn't have a rodent problem either. So, so moving on, 1972, school, same thing, that space in the middle. 1977, apparently, in the climate records in Niagara County had actually 1976 had one of the coldest winters on record, and they had, I think, 35 to 40 foot of snow that winter in 1976. In the spring of 1976, the climate kind of warmed up well. They had a really nice spring. All the snow melted, leached down into the ground, or it ran off. But the problem was that the reason why William T. Love couldn't extend his canal is because he had some tough bedrock to get through. Once he got 20 feet or less into the ground. So what happened was this bathtub effect, in which all the melt from the snow reached as far down as it could, and its threshold got overreached, and then the water started showing up above the surface. So, and they call that the bathtub effect. So the water rose above the level of the ground surface. So the contaminants came up with the water as well. In 1977, it was at an all-time high, and people's backyards that had subsided since they didn't pack the ground down very well were showing inundation, and it wasn't water. They knew it wasn't water. It wasn't a very nice aesthetic, and it smelled. But they still lived there because they thought they got a hell of a deal on their houses as well. There was a lot of other things that went on. The state of New York was kind of on both sides of it. They didn't want to pay to relocate everybody. There was no funds designated by the EPA. The EPA had just begun in the mid-70s, early to mid-70s. They didn't have enough power to overreach to pay to move people or even evaluate whether or not this is a problem. They're still learning, and there was no Superfund law in effect at that point. There was a re-election that was looming, and President Carter was already having a hard time because there was a hostage crisis that occurred as well. So his focus wasn't all on this environmental situation in Upper New York. So they eventually got to a point where he had to take action. This is a picture in early 1980. That's the middle section. North is on the left side of the page. South is on the right side. This is what it looked like after the snow effect had melted, and this white material here isn't snow. This is those white rocks that showed up at the surface. And that's what the kids love to play with, that created fires. The white rock floated to the top because the surface of this cinder area opened up, if you will, and a bunch of sinkholes and whatnot were encountered and surfaced. And a lot of the material based on its characteristics floated with the water. Petroleum products and some of the volatile organic compounds have a density lighter than water. They're going to float. And once everything dries up, then they just settle on the top of the ground. So state of emergency occurred in late 1970s. Finally, 1980, President Carter enacted the Superfund laws known as CERCLA, Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act, CERCLA, Superfund, if you will. They created a fund to investigate and mitigate. They had very limited technology to mitigate the contamination back then, but they did what they could to control it. They could not move 239 families out at one time, and there was an apartment complex that they had built, that the Niagara Falls Housing Commission had built right next to this neighborhood that was also affected, in which they had to relocate those families as well. So huge mess. Yes.
That the rocks, the kids, what was the composition?
What they were, they had high levels of benzene in them and naphthalene. Yeah. So, Agent Orange, more or less. Yeah. And napalm. So.
That's the spark.
Yeah. This is the beginning of the remedial efforts. At this point in time, most everyone that wanted to be evacuated was. There were some stubborn citizens that did not want to give up their homestead. They were being given just above market value for their homes, but they thought they had a piece of paradise. They didn't want to leave. They were eventually forced out because it was a danger. And this area became a landfill. And there was spreading to other areas and to the river. There were about 12 other chemical plants along the river within a 5-mile distance of this site. But this site was the one that had the highest threat of contaminating the river. So something had to be done, or else the river was going to carry the contamination downstream and cause a worse problem. So the Zephyrs went into place. This is the backyard of someone's home. Used to be this metal pole used to be a fence post. There was just a chain link fence here where the kids could open a gate and go play in the in the central space. But this is the see that white substance there? That's the material that surfaced. And this orange substance is other substances full of furans and phenols and you name it, whatever we could come up with to refine and create in the chemical industry was showing up there, from pesticides and herbicides to petroleum distillates to cleaning solvents. The same stuff we find at dry cleaning plants was all showing up there. This was the school parking lot. There, apparently when this picture had been taken, it hadn't rained there for months. This water was showing up from, was continuing to leach upward like a spring. And that school had been abandoned for quite some time at this point. It's hard to see in this picture, but this is someone's basement and there's a stream of black substance just constantly flowing in. So anyway, state of emergency, people were evacuated. The Love Canal area residential association was created. They had to go through a lot of different things. There was a lot of publicity posted about this. Even back then, this was before social media. So the only way to get it across to a lot of people was to be on TV. And this created the environmental movement, if you will, beyond just saving forests. And here's the picture, 1980. The land was capped. This is the apartment complex over here. And then the EPA had created a couple remediation compounds with clay and other concrete fill, something that they thought that would hold it at least temporarily. Yeah, semi-impervious at that point, but they've continued to work on it. Runoff that continued to occur. Here's a piece of a drum that they had buried that surfaced as well. Drums, there were industrial sized drums, there were industrial 55-gallon drums. If they had any airspace in them, they would float as well. So that was another problem that occurred. And here's the demolition efforts. Again, these pictures were taken in the early 80s. So, I mean, they were out, yeah. And they were forced at that point. It became a controlled neighborhood. And the remedial efforts continued. They capped all the sewers. They capped all the swales, everything running underground. They almost encapsulated the contamination by installing slurry walls, which are basically walls that are installed beneath the ground 40 or more feet below to prevent groundwater from migrating. And again, more efforts. This was just more of what was going on. In the late 80s, the impervious cap was not really effective, and the vapors were causing problems. So what they did is they installed a vapor barrier and a vapor venting system, in which they would constantly burn the vapors in one of the compounds that they had constructed on site. And they kept on moving outside of the radius of the neighborhood when they would find a new property contaminated, and they would remediate that property as they came around. Yeah, you got a truck here running over, or that's running over this house, bulldozing a house, and you got a guy spraying the house because the house is full of asbestos. They figured out the asbestos product was causing exposure to the workers out there, so they had to figure a way to control that as well. So it had every bit of you could think of wrong with it. Worst case scenario, and so on and so forth. So that's a lot to take in. They did a home sale for some reason. I don't know who would want to buy that, but the deed looked a lot different than it did when Hooker had sold this to the school board. And they're still dealing with it. This is in 1983. They created some other actions and rules regarding the site, and continue to sample. And it's going on today. The costs don't compare anymore. They've spent hundreds of millions of dollars on it that we know about in direct remediation costs, probably over $2 or $3 billion in other claims and liabilities, on top of EPA's total estimated $6 billion ticket on it, on a property that sold for $1. Yeah. So this is what it looks like. If you drive up to it, this chain link fence is still there apparently. And so anyone that wants to go to Niagara Falls, you can take a sightseeing tour over here. It's about 5 miles to the east of downtown Niagara. Yeah, yeah. So they found in this site alone, some of the chemicals they found when they did some other studies, ecological studies, found that they were affecting some chromosomes and had come up with new types of cancer and other diseases. So that's the main reason why, everyone was concerned about it. They didn't know what was gonna come of it. And some didn't surface in the people that inhabited those houses until 20 or 30 years later, or 2 to 3 generations later. It's still occurring. It's being passed along to their kids and grandkids. Mhm. They've continued to do monitoring, supposedly, and there are areas that they restrict for recreation, but uh, apparently there's a decent amount of area that they've cleared for recreation in the vicinity. So, I mean, it's swim at your own risk. Now, I mean, I don't know anyone here that would want to go jump in Buffalo Bayou, but it's not too different. So,
Since it is, like you said, in bathtub effect, right? You've got all this granite or hard rock. Why wouldn't they just scoop it out the contaminants and haul them off and dispose of them in a different area or incinerate them or whatever they do to neutralize the bad effects?
they did what they knew how to do that was practical at the time. Because there were other landfills that might accept the material, but it wasn't proven that it would have been contained at those areas either. So yeah, I mean, they just didn't know what to do with all the materials. It was I think at the end of the day, it was 80,000 cubic yards of material that they knew that they would have had to transport. So they said they thought just leaving it in place would have, and it's been effective apparently. It's been delineated and it's isolated. So yes, sir. That's right. It was at the time that this was occurring when Occidental had acquired Hooker, and Occidental was trying to distance themselves from the issue because they had said they had no knowledge this was occurring, because they also did not identify any due diligence in purchasing the company as well. Yeah. So yeah, Oxy Chemical, but it ended up being Oxy. Yeah, absolutely. They put up a fight as well. They did not want the negative press, but they ended up getting it. Yes.
As opposed to a contaminated area, what constitutes a
So a Superfund is an area with significant enough contamination that there's been a hazard index created that's calculated from certain aspects of how dangerous the compounds are, how many compounds there are. You put them together, one compound alone is dangerous. 10 different toxic compounds together is significantly more dangerous. And then what the ability for the responsible party is to conduct the remediation and financially support it, in addition to enforce the regulations and restrictions. So for instance, Occidental Chemical cannot force people to move out of the neighborhood. Only the federal government could force people out of the neighborhood at that point. The chemical company had plenty of money. Although Hooker at the time said they were bankrupt because they didn't exist anymore. And and this one became a super fund because the government didn't know what the extent of the financial responsibility was going to be at the end of the day. Nowadays, it's harder to get into the super fund. You can't just select to give up, and put your hands in the air and say, I can't afford this. I don't want to deal with it. Let the government take over it. It's a process where they are very selective to put you in super fund.
Superfund sites are there. The greater-
They're about 40 roundabout. Open active sites, and I'll show you a list in a minute. But there's probably about 10 active Superfund sites, about 10, right? In Houston actually, it's surprising there's not more as active we are in the chemical and petroleum industries. So,
It's amazing as time goes on. People forget.
oh yeah, yeah.
And they don't bring it up. There are sites right next to downtown Houston side, northeast side. There's a big area that is just now being redeveloped.
Mhm.
That was a super fun. I think Peter Yee or Peter Lee, anyway, bought the city of Houston, sold it to, basically handed it to him.
Yeah, it was called Mini Diversified Interests. It was old lead smelting company. Yeah, yeah. So they that was one of them, and then there was another one called International Paper. Well, the company was International Paper, but it was the Trinity River Superfund site over I-10 on the way to Baytown, and they thought they were closed until Hurricane Harvey had come around and washed out the cap completely. So that one reopened. Yeah.
Property since that we've dealt with land transactions. And the only, unless you, of course, we're older than dirt, right? So we remember Superfund and all that stuff. So we kind of knew the history of some of the areas, but in some of them, one of the tracks that we looked at was over on off of South Main area,
Mhm.
going out that direction. And the only thing that was kind of a flag to us, the land that we were listing was fine. But next to it, when we were looking at aerials, we could see these things that looked like vents.
Mhm.
And I know they had those, we were familiar with them in Pasadena. There were some areas where they had monitor vents, I guess, or
Mhm.
something. So that was our only clue to look, that there might be an issue.
Mhm.
They
Yeah.
They don't, there isn't really a lot of information. Don't know where.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm hoping to give y'all today. So, yeah. Yeah, I bet. Well, I mean, it could have been a landfill, closed landfill, and those could have been vapor capture system. And there's a lot of that, especially off of South Main. And there are a couple Superfund sites down there as well. So it's a plethora of things that occur in that area, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. 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 Well, anything can be fixed. Anything can be mitigated. It just depends on how much time you have and eventually how much money and patience you have. It can be. I mean, there's some things that are gonna have, they're gonna have some lingering perspectives on. Do I really want to live on top of a former landfill? For a couple of different reasons, that doesn't sound like a good idea. But again, when we're running out of land, able to develop, which, I mean, sounds crazy, but there's some areas that seem like they're more convenient now, like Atascocita. It used to be a hell of a distance from downtown Houston, and there's a huge landfill over there that took in most of the city's waste, municipal waste. There's areas of that landfill that have been built above with residential. because it just seemed like it's a more convenient area. Yeah. Yeah, what there was a soccer park right next to it too, and there was a prison right next to it too. I know the prison was built on the landfill. So, I mean, looks desirable to somebody, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, this is the map, Niagara. And each of these circles is one of Hooker Chemicals plants. Every one of them turned into a Superfund site. And this is just Niagara. So, yeah. I didn't want this presentation to be all about Love Canal, but what you can learn here is if you didn't do your research going into it and your title company missed something, that review, that one paragraph can make all the difference. All of that's caught in an environmental assessment, but you can look at some indicators to try to figure out what they are. Just start asking, what this is. Why is this here? Who put this here? And that might have some significance moving forward. So the importance of getting an environmental there. Does anyone have any other questions about Love Canal? Okay. Well, yeah. So as far as what value do you have in obtaining this information, as far as a seller's perspective, even if the seller, when they purchased the property, had some due diligence conducted, did it miss anything? Is there anything that's going to be uncovered that's going to become a problem? You want to get the deal done. And you want to make sure you avoid as many road humps as possible. And you want to mitigate what you can before coming into contract on the seller side. And you also give the sellers when you have a jump start on this, even though the phase one doesn't benefit the seller at all, really. They already own the property. They own the liability that they might not have caught when they purchased it. They might be able to locate key documentation, or there might be people there that can answer questions. That could be gaps in information as you're moving into an assessment. So you can capture that at that moment instead of it going by the wayside and not having a chance to do so. There's a lot of times when phase will get involved. The contract is already in effect, and there's information lost. The property already either liquidated or moved. The owners already packed up their office and shredded everything. Long-term past employees are no longer there. If they're not working for the company, they're not going to answer a question about it. And we've lost information. It's forced us to go do costly investigation that we might not have had to do before. Purchasers, obviously, before coming into contract, you can create leverage on a deal with some of that knowledge and understanding. You can jumpstart the process with regulatory file documentation as well, so you're not delaying financing, things that get held up. You can assist the consultant that you choose to do the environmental with providing some information and areas to focus on. And you can also assist with the lender selection and maybe the avoidance of some of the difficulties that they may create because you didn't disclose any of this information that could be out there. There's not much in the way of a purchaser's disclosure, albeit it does help the lender identify whether or not their policies even allow that loan to occur if there's some kind of environmental concern. So there are some values in that can be captured in looking into this before the deal occurs. So not all consultants are on an equal pedestal as well, as far as giving you a complete and correct assessment either. Some consultants don't understand the standards and they're just running through just to sell a product and create a deliverable. That happens quite often. There's very, very loose regulation, if not any at all, regarding who can conduct the assessment. You're taking the consultant's word that they're qualified, experienced. Right now, there's not a specific license to do so. So, you know, it is nice to know information that the consultant might have missed and you couldn't catch it. And I'll give you an example shortly of where you could have maybe caught some information that might have been missed by a consultant. So anyways, there's a lot of value in knowing this stuff. I'm gonna distribute this Word file that I have a lot of hyperlinks on that might help you. Maybe you can add some of them to your favorites and utilize them. I'll show you how to use them and what you can gain from them. To start off with, the state of, I'm gonna focus on the state of Texas. The main environmental commission in the state of Texas is Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, TCEQ. A lot of what you can search is on the TCEQ Central Registry. You can search by address or entity name, maybe, depending on what you're really looking for or trying to focus in on. Sometimes it's good to have some information in hand before going to the registry. If you know where your property is, of course, there are some mapping resources as well. One of the mapping resources is this groundwater contamination viewer. It's not a complete inventory, but it's pretty good. Here's some icons on top of the page. This one layered book icon is the layer list. And I'm going to move that. The active groundwater contamination case is the only active one you need to have checked. And then this inactive one will capture everything else. Either it's open now or had been closed prior to 2022. The TCQ hasn't updated this, so anything from 2023 and 2024 is not on there. Yes, sir.
If there's an area in West Texas that was a toxic dump site that's still up on this.
Yeah, yeah. There's a Odessa Chromium 1 and a Odessa Chromium 2 that I know of for sure. And there's a few others that have shown up. There's one other real usable feature on this mapper. It's called the municipal settings designations. This is where groundwater has been impacted. And it's not going to show up at this scale, but I'm going to click it anyways. We'll zoom in. I'll show you. This is where there's still contaminated groundwater in place, but a restrictive covenant has been put in to limit the usage of the groundwater. Actually, eliminate the usage of that groundwater. So you can't really see Houston if it shows you the density here. But as you zoom in, this is all the sites that show up in West Houston per se, right? So the I'll bring up the legend. Active are the pink boxes and inactive are the green boxes. And then these other polygons are the municipal setting designation sites. So if you click on the box, if you will, it'll tell you which site it is. And it'll give you some it'll give you some limited information on it. And if it's a municipal setting designation, it'll tell you which one that is and what the name of the site is. Also, in the information, it'll tell you that it's under remediation department or if it's in something else. So if I'm looking at a Superfund site, there's a Superfund site over on the west side of town known as Crystal Chemical. And here it is off of West Park and the Beltway right here. This is one Superfund site still active. They were manufacturing pesticides that contain arsenic. And arsenic had gotten all over the place in this site. It's still active. Mhm. They started discovering the impact about 30 years ago. Yeah. So I know what the site is. What got out of it? I know what the site is, Crystal Chemical. I know it's in Houston. If I went to my registry, I could type in the name. Oop. There we go. And Houston. I like to search broadly initially. And there we go. We got two identifiers here. The one I know is Rogerdale, but you can always look at the other one. So for instance, Blankenship. This is the same site, it's just under a different address. But we'll go to the one that's the Superfund. You can see. Here it is. Union Pacific Railroad Company is one of the responsible parties, and Geodetox Inc. is another one. That's the remedial company. I don't know why they're in there as the customer name though, but they've always been. The listings associated with Crystal Chemical are all of these: industrial and hazardous waste, municipal setting designation, that restrictive covenant, and Superfund. SUP 107 is the designated number.
When
Sorry?
you have a Superfund site like that, and you got Union Pacific Railroad, who's responsible for millions of dollars of cost? You know, I mean, is it covered by, since they're an entity kind of like they are, and it's the government helping them, or?
When it's a super fund.
To a point, yeah, they are, but if that company is still solvent, then the government's going to do everything that they can to recoup the costs. Yeah, so they will they'll place liens on the property, and until that cost is recovered, that property is owned by the government. Yeah, I mean, or if it can still make some money and taxes can be generated, then they'll allow that company to continue to operate it. But that's very, very rare. Especially now that probably wouldn't meet a hazard index calculation because the company could pay for the contaminated site to be remediated. Yep.
Every now and then we'll have an agent who will look at a property that's a cleaning facility.
Oh, yeah.
You know. So how often are those considered to be hazardous because of the chemicals that because, you know, it's kind of a risk to buy one.
For sure. Yeah. It's a huge risk. Dry cleaning is a hot topic. That's one of those things you're looking for. Especially if you're dealing with retail centers. Dry cleaners are a problem. They're this.
Site over off the Jones Road.
Well, that one is infamous. That one's infamous. As well. I'll show you some details about that one for sure.
Shut down wells and everything.
Yeah, it was that one was a not as a good thing, but that was a pioneer. Indexes of the dry cleaner remediation movement People didn't consider dry cleaners to be a problem until the Jones Road dry cleaning site came up. So Superfunds in Texas,
Is that considered a super fund?
yeah, it is. I'll do Superfunds by county so you can see. It won't let me, well, maybe it'll, here. Here we go. Here's all the Superfund sites in Harris County. Right? Here is Jones Road groundwater plume. That's the one we're talking about. Northwest, Jones Road and Cypress North Houston, right in the middle. Residential and school and somewhere you wouldn't expect a Superfund site to be. All right, so see if I can find a document that makes that you can see. There we go. So the Jones Road groundwater site was just a little retail center, a small time dry cleaning facility that was using perchloroethylene. And they were disposing of their spent dry cleaner solvent waste out the back door and into the drains. And down into the sinks inside the shop. And they were probably generating, less than 1,000 gallons of waste a year when they were operating, which is not much for a dry cleaning plant that operates year round. So it wasn't anything special to look at. Here is a map. This right here, can everyone see this little building right here? That's the retail center from which it originated from. Every water well within this red line, if not greater than that, became contaminated as a result of the release from this dry cleaner facility. It went in every direction. Normally, we think of groundwater as contaminating and moving into one direction. This one didn't. It took every path it knew to take to get wherever it wanted to go. And it got down in the subsurface over 200 foot. Most of the time, contaminated sites that have groundwater contamination are going to be limited to the upper 30 to 50 foot. But this one wasn't because of the properties of dry cleaner solvents. They like to sink and leach through dirt over time. So this one, like Clara was saying, they had, everyone out here had a water well, had a private water well. No mud existed out here before they found this contamination. The EPA and the TCQ both worked together and they created a mud and installed it at the expense of the responsible party, who was a subsidiary of Comet Cleaners, who bankrupted, and the owner of the dry cleaner center, who didn't last long financially with this deal. So they created the mud. This was a Superfund site because of all the potential exposure to residents and other water users in the area. And it needed funding to get mitigated and remediated. So now there's an area that's been designated as a restrictive covenant where you cannot do anything with the groundwater. You have to get a permit to even test the groundwater now in a lot of the cases.
They were, it was common,
Mhm.
they were a franchise. Did that spark going after and checking all of them?
So this one was just named Comets and they got away with that somehow. They never found a connection between it and a corporate cleaning company. Yeah. So, and it was some other name as well. It came under 2 or 3 names. This all occurred The discovery was in the mid-90s to a limited extent during a real estate transaction. Nevertheless, prior to the time we thought dry cleaners were a problem, and it turned into a bigger problem in the early 2000s. This was the beginning of the state's dry cleaner remediation program. This is when they took all the funding from petroleum storage tank sites, from gasoline station sites, which we thought were a problem. They moved all that money into the dry cleaner remediation program because this was a bigger problem. The substances were more toxic and they were more mobile. And there were more dry cleaner owners that were not financially responsible than gasoline station owners at that time. Yes. A phase 2 was done during a real estate transaction. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so the phase 1 is the inquiry and the research. We don't do any testing during a phase 1, but we review historical, we review regulatory records, we interview an inquiry, we conduct an inspection to come up with a conclusion. Does a condition possibly exist or not? And then the recommendation is to that additional investigation is necessary or it's not. Anything beyond the scope of phase 1 is a phase 2, where we go in and do the testing. So, yeah, so asbestos and lead testing are different scope items that have other type of risk and other type of requirements. But during your normal phase 2, unless you were burying asbestos containing material on your property, or let's say you're building burnt to the ground and the building material spread all over the place, you would not consider asbestos to be in the ground.
The gentleman, Richard Copeland, has asked that people use a mic
Oh, yeah.
so he can hear. He said, I just got a
Okay. Yeah.
text from him
I
saying.
completely
that,
forgot. I completely forgot about
So
that.
if you're gonna talk, try to get a mic.
But
You're welcome.
Thank you,
the
Steve.
question was, phase 2, does it include asbestos, lead, any other building type product, or beyond soil and groundwater or other type of environmental testing? And the answer is normally no. Now, lead is a different beast in itself. So it might occur in the paint on the building, and it's the same thing. If it's part of the building, it's not considered to be a release into the environment unless the building is deteriorated or has been dispersed across the property by demolition. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to make sure she's dealing with a particular instance. When you're testing for lead in a residence, if a buyer is an investor is going to purchase an older home built before 1978 and use it for a tenant or something like that, and you don't have appropriate information from the seller regarding lead-based paint that might be in it, then to have it inspected for lead is appropriate because of liability going forward. Also, with regard to asbestos prior to when did they stop using asbestos?
They're still using it.
Insulation, great. So testing for asbestos in especially older homes that used asbestos shingle on the siding and potentially asbestos in insulation, and things like mold, which can get into the sheetrock and also get into insulation and things like that. Here again, if you're going to destroy a home, a structure that is potentially infected, contaminated rather, not infected. But if it's got mold potentially black mold or any other kind of mold that's environmentally unfriendly, or asbestos, those have to be abated. Okay, if you're going to take can you clarify what the process is
Okay, so
as
there,
far as something like that and the legal requirements?
absolutely. There are distinctions and requirements for residential and commercial. Residential, if it's less than 4 units, it's considered single family residential, it's unregulated. And anyone can go do it. Now, that doesn't mean they're trustworthy. That just means the state and the federal government has no enforcement capability. Lead-based paint, in some instances, depending on how many homes were built by a particular contractor, that might contain the paint. Even if they're single-family residential individually, they're still likely unregulated until you get to a point of public access buildings, anything that's commercial, industrial, non-residential.
Can you hand her your?
There we go.
So if you don't have, if it's residential, you don't have to do anything.
You don't necessarily have to do anything. You just might choose to do something before you decide to occupy it. So if I were buying a home and it was of older vintage, where especially prior to 1980, I would want to know if lead-based paint exists there or not. And I would want to know from the condition, could asbestos be present to where I could be exposed to it? Asbestos in good condition is not an exposure issue. It's when asbestos has been, or the building material has been damaged. But so so for single family residential, that's unique per deal. So it doesn't always occur.
But that would be a situation where you've got a user, an end user, single family end user.
Mhm.
In your situation, you have an investor who is purchasing that home, that they're going to have a tenant. There's a potential liability issue. So what you're trying to do with your guy is you want to indemnify them. So testing now, and she contacted your
Yeah,
company.
yeah,
So
Okay.
testing now to indemnify your buyer so that he knows
yeah,
it's
what he's
protecting him.
buying.
Right, it's
Yeah.
protecting him. So, but if somebody wanted to buy the home to live in it, that's up to them. But would you encourage them? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Because if something happens, who are they going to come back on? They're going to come back on us.
And then my question was like, if they order the phase 1, that doesn't mean that you're gonna come back with that results, advising to do the next steps, or it's better to go, because it's different, no? They can,
So phase 1 strictly does not include evaluation of asbestos in building material, lead-based paint, lead in drinking water. Those are non-scope items. So we would have to specifically be asked to do those. In a standard phase 1, they don't come with it.
so what does phase 1 gives you?
So what we're looking for are releases or potential releases to the environment from substances known to be hazardous or petroleum products that have been released to the environment into the soil, groundwater, or air. Substances that were part of building structures are exempt from that. They're not part of that consideration. Into the soil.
At what time did they start? I mean, they have requirements, say you go to a C-store and they have to take the tanks out. They do have requirements as far as what people can do in terms of taking those tanks out.
Right.
As far as, I mean, I had a friend who was an associate in terms of business, but he was taking tanks out. He got into doing that for gas stations, and I don't think they had any restrictions whenever he was doing it. I don't know how long they've been doing that, but he ended up dying
Mhm.
because of the contamination and getting it, I guess, he wasn't well protected. But he didn't know that it was a problem. He was just taking tanks out.
Yeah.
So at what time did they start requiring that on even C-stores?
1986, September 1st, 1986. So there were a lot of people taking tanks out of the ground. After that, it had become strongly enforced to have that licensing to remove tanks or do any underground storage tank work. That came into fold in roundabout the early 90s though. So, but you had to, yeah, yeah. And there was a lot of contractors that were doing it. You didn't have to have a license when the tanks were put in prior to that, prior to 86, where they were normally taking the same tanks out. So, yes, sir.
Hey, Ross, thank you for coming. Hey, quick question. So if a phase one has been done on a property, let's say it's land, raw land, how good is that phase one if no development has happened on that land? Would you say, can you say?
Well, it just depends on how thorough and complete of work on research and resource usage was done on that land. There could be instances where there might be some holes in there, depending on did the consultant look at all the resources available? Did they fill in all the gaps to figure out the history going back to, even though it's undeveloped now, at least the 1940s? And did they look at all of the regulatory databases that might be relevant in the area that the property was? So if you had someone that's not operated, that a consultant is outside the state of Texas, and they didn't have specific knowledge of Texas rules, you might have a piece of land that's undeveloped now. That consultant only looked at the databases that are standard for most phase ones. They might not have understood that we have a whole other industry that's governed by Railroad Commission, and they might not have researched the Railroad Commission cleanup list. So that could be an issue that might come up, or a closed landfill that comes up in addition to some of these other databases that you're required to look at. So it could go either way.
We recommend that they even try to go in and look at historical photos, because sometimes you can see that something was done on that property, even though it's just raw land,
Mhm.
that something was there, or there was a hole there that's been covered. And we run into that periodically.
Well, the reason.
Those are sites we can use as agents.
Mhm.
Do kind of what you're gonna talk to self.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll show you an example of one. And I'll show you where to get the resource if you don't have it. We have it, obviously. Here's a site. I use this as an example every time. Here's a property, an assessment done by a company. I don't mind showing them because they've gotten enforcement actions by the state. They're public. They're not supposed to be conducting environmental testing or evaluations because of some of the issues they've come up across. But this company, they did a property in San Antonio, 2520 McCullough. There's a property here. It's north of downtown San Antonio, so there's been development there for quite some time. The report looks like it might hold water. It looks like it was, they knew what they were doing. And I'm gonna point out all the major issues with it in the body, but they go into a lot of things. And this is their description of the property. It's a commercial office property. That's not very specific. Current use of adjoining properties. It's surrounded by residential and commercial properties. Not very helpful. I guess, they continue to write things in there. The historical gets kind of iffy as well. And aerial photographs had been obtained by this company. Some company provided these aerial photographs. Here they are here. They show the land and surrounding areas of undeveloped land from 38 to 66 with some roads, but some very vague descriptions of usage. Sanborn maps were not identified or used for this study. It's odd being near downtown. I'll show you what a Sanborn map is. Street directories were not identified for this study. So how are you going to know what the property is without supplementing your resources? And that's kind of what a very important aspect of doing an environmental study. Those are the two main things. I get to these other ones. Everyone finds these interesting, if I can get to. So here's the map. This is how it's presented in the report. Can any of you tell me where the property is? No, because it's not identified on the map, right? Well, you have to kind of zoom in on the property to get it. It's right here, right? So this is more current. I think that this one is 2020. The company that they hired to get the aerial photographs, it does a good job. This is 1938. That's not undeveloped land. All right. How do you know it's residential as well? This is the property here. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball here. It'd be nice to know that, how they came up with that. If they didn't use directories or Sanborn maps, which are other resources. Here's their adjacent properties, north, south, east, west, whatever that means. Here's their pictures of the property. Okay. So anyways, this is, see this, does anyone see this little imprint right here? Yeah, street map, street view, yeah, 2022 street view. They went and got the 2022 street view. So what I did is I figured, okay, well, I'm going to compare. I'm going to go to street view and see if mine looks like theirs. Here's what I got from street view. And then here's the other picture I got from street view. And here's another one. This one has this black Ford truck in there, this F-150. Same one shows up. It's always parked there, I guess. I don't know. They didn't go to the site. How are you going to do an environmental assessment? How are you going to identify critical features if you didn't go to the property? Yes, you have a microphone right in front of you. Sorry.
I have a question. I'm dealing with an off-market property.
Mhm.
It's not my property, somebody else's thing. The agent helped to buy but 40 acres of land from a family.
Mhm.
I asked him if if there was any EPA or environmental thing done on that land. His answer was, no, it was a good deal. We didn't think it that much. It's off market. The buyer bought it.
Right.
And 20% down payment. The rest is all the bank.
Mhm.
How does the bank require this assessment before they give the loan?
It depends. A lot of different banks have different policies, and it depends what kind of funding it is as well. If it was an SBA loan, then there's a starting point.
Farmland credit union. What is it? Farm and land credit union is the
Okay.
one.
Um,
lender.
Not necessarily.
So they don't ask for that.
No, they sometimes rely on a risk, a third-party vendor that has this environmental risk database that they can press a button and they can run a report and say whether risk exists or not.
Okay.
So sometimes they do that depending on the amount of the loan.
Okay, so I'm coming in the side of the engineering side. So it's right now the engineering development coming in. So they asked me to come in as like a consultant. So
Mhm.
I asked for the environmental assessment. He didn't have it. But when he's requesting for the fundraising, for but $4 million for the engineering and construction, it's a raw land,
Mhm.
dubbing, and he claiming that Horton and other builders are already interested in to buy the land to build their subdivision.
Mhm.
My question is, without any assessment and everything, bank is giving the loan, Horton and Johnson Development doing there's absolutely no work is being done.
Yeah.
So how can they create this beautiful PowerPoint presentation asking for the LP funds,
Mhm.
right? The GPs too, guys, they're requiring all the limited partners to come in. It's like a waterfall structure.
Right.
In order to do that, without any of this due diligence, so that's where I kind of stopped and just said, where is the paperwork?
I mean, I have never seen a Horton property. I've never seen DR Horton
Yeah.
obtain or develop on land that they haven't done an environmental study on.
Okay, so
I've
they
never
do.
seen that. No, it
So-
doesn't necessarily have to be the bank. The bank, it can be exempt from liability issues.
Yeah.
It all goes back to the user, the purchaser, the owner. That's who all this affects.
So the buyer required to have all these paperwork done and the assessment and everything done, right? In order even to say that we will buy this out from you.
Absolutely.
So that could be a bogus claim saying that somebody is already ready to buy this land.
I mean,
Yeah.
it sounds like a fire sale to me,
Okay,
you know,
okay.
but I mean, they just want as little friction as possible, maybe. That could be something that could get in the way if something
Okay.
was found.
So when the family sold the land to this building, wouldn't they require the property condition statement? We have a document property. They should have been, if there is any issues there,
Now,
would they supposed to do the disclosure form?
what the disclosures, what
Not
you,
necessarily.
well,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, they are, but, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm not giving legal advice here, but they might not know specifically any conditions, especially if it's land. I mean, land can be subject to a lot of different concerns. If there was oil and gas leases on it before, and you're not required to know what's going on that lease. When they end it and cut the surface off, you might not know that there was an issue there. They're not, the oil and gas operator is not required to report it to you. So you wouldn't have the specific knowledge, and you can answer that confidently. You would rather not know in a lot of instances if you were selling the property to do that disclosure.
But you would advise all the land buyers to do this assessment.
That's
Yeah,
right.
somebody has to do it,
That's right. Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The thing about it is, if the land was originally purchased, you said it was one of the credit unions, one of the land credit unions, like Capital Farm Credit or
Mhm.
Texas Capital Farm or something
Right.
like that.
Yeah,
If the land was originally purchased and the intent was like agricultural,
it was
okay,
agricultural.
then chances are the credit union didn't require
Okay,
didn't require a phase one to be done.
okay,
When we bought our land out in Washington County, there was no requirement for a phase one
yeah,
because it was going to be used. We were the end user and it was agricultural use.
right.
Going forward,
Chemicals that would kill you.
going forward, if it's going to be used for some sort of development, even farmland, okay, especially if they've had cattle, livestock or something on it,
It's a cotton fields. I went and checked it.
if they used pesticides on it for
Pesticides,
anything,
yeah,
then chances are you might want to have one done. But unless you can find the spot like with cattle, you know, if you have a cattle rub and you have barrels that have the pesticides, then you're going to find probably a small area that may have some contamination. Okay. That's why you even do a phase one or
Okay.
something on livestock land,
Okay.
farm and ranch. But just for safety's sake, if you're representing the buyer,
Yeah.
you have them do a phase one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But by just saying people, why would the buyer go and buy it? Not the buyer, invest it, because the numbers say that there isn't a prospect buyer is there. All these builders are ready to buy it
Mhm.
and build the multifamily development happening. So when you see that one and show all the IRR and all the thing, people will just jump in and invest it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
10%, 7%.
Mhm.
But when you ask for all the due diligence, it's like, okay, we don't have that.
Yeah, and at that point, it's okay, well then we would like to have the opportunity to conduct the assessment and work on the due diligence ourselves, which you might want to do anyways, so you can control and select who's doing it that you trust and have that valid for your purchaser. That, and then by conducting the phase one, they fall into a category of innocent landowner protections, which if they didn't do anything to the property before they bought it, they're not liable for any conditions that were done prior to, as long as they didn't have anything to do with it. They weren't responsible. If there was something found after the fact, all they have to do is continue obligations necessary to mitigate if something were to be found. But no one can go sue them. And if they were to, for instance, get sick from exposure to something that might be there. That's why you do the phase one. Yeah, especially for residential. That risk tolerance goes way goes way down when it becomes something like that. That's a sensitive land use for sure. So, but I wanted to show one thing. We were asking about asbestos and that they still use it and whatnot. This is a very popular brake company. They produce brake pads for your cars and trucks. Asbestos. One of the best building materials ever devised by mankind was asbestos. It's fireproof. It's basically indestructible. It lasts forever. The problem is it gives you lung cancer. But whenever you're trying to slow down your car or truck, those brake pads create a lot of friction. If you don't have something in the brake pads to help secure the amount of heat and pressure to being caused by applying the brakes, right, fire. But then you're going to wear down your brake pads quite often. You're going to go through a lot of them. So the solution was to put asbestos in brake pads. So believe it or not, you're still driving down the road, you're being exposed to asbestos, especially in traffic jams. It's getting up in the air, not to scare anyone, but they still make it and they still sell it. People still buy it and install it into things. The rule is that it's not, the products are not manufactured in the US, but we can buy them from outside of the US as we see fit. So problem solved. Yeah. Why get rid of something that's good? Anything that's good is always dangerous, especially especially with like sugary foods or whatever, anything that seems like it's a great thing. But anyways, talking about in rural areas, agricultural land, undeveloped land out in outlying areas, there are concerns. Even if there wasn't industry present, there still might be concerns. For instance, does anyone here have any properties in Fort Bend County? No. Okay. Well, I'm just using it because it's an adjacent county to Harris. But here's a property, the Rose Flying Service. It's over off of Jackson Road near East Bernard. just west southwest of Houston. I don't know, about 50 or so miles from Houston. Rose Flying Service. They operated a pesticide application facility, which they would do crop spraying. So they had a little runway, didn't look like anything. It looked like just a dirt road. And then they had a bunch of tanks next to the runway where they would fill the pesticides up in the planes before they would take off in crop dust in the area. Those kind of properties eventually have a problem. There's a release of pesticides there. It was identified in some preliminary state assessments. Someone identified that they existed and they were using hazardous substances. The act of applying the pesticide is not a regulated activity as long as you're doing it within the realm of the manufacturer's specifications. Which is a very broad and vague statement and can be interpreted a million different ways. But anyways, the central registry is a very good tool to use, especially to find things like this. If you have a property, a search can help on this. Okay, jumping back to 2520 McCullough in San Antonio. The consultant said that there was no Sanborn maps identified or used for that study. Well, we found one in 1952, San Antonio. And lost my place. A drawn map, yeah. Here we go. Here's the property right here. The address changed, which happens quite often near a city. But this is the property right here. It used to be 1310 through 1314 McCullough. But right here is the issue. Dry cleaner, solvent tank, and a rug cleaning facility that was using the same solvents. Well, it was cleared. It was cleared by this other company. They thought it was fine. And their conclusion states so. Because there was just commercial or undeveloped land and commercial offices historically. Let's see. Where do we get back to?
Did they not have a professional degree saying you gotta do it this way?
Oh, yeah. Well, they have requirements. They do. Here's the findings. Here's the findings. They have listed sites in the database. They didn't say which ones. There's a low possibility that could cause impact to the site. Those aren't a threat to the target site. It's all incorrect terminology anyways. Opinion, revealed no evidence of recognized environmental conditions. Conclusion, no on-site or off-site environmental conditions. No further actions required. But the historical is what is very important here. And that's where you're not getting what you paid for. They were not identified or used.
And they're still going? Or are they?
I haven't seen a report this year from them. But they have an enforcement action that was filed with the Texas Board of Professional Geoscientists. They were doing phase 2 work as well, and they weren't doing a very good job at that either. Someone did, there was a lot of disagreement with their scope and how they took samples and preserved their samples as well, if they went to the property to take them at all. And this one site that I saw, they didn't even go to the property. The owner said no one had ever drilled there before for phase 2. Somehow he got samples, but he didn't drill. I don't know how you do that.
Hey, Ross.
Well, I do. You go get them from somewhere else. Maybe
Hey,
your
Ross, can you
backyard.
hear me? Can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
All right, this is Richard. I actually had a dealing with this company years ago on a transaction. And I actually brought you in on it, because I didn't like the way it was going. And we discussed this company before.
Uh-huh.
And in this particular case, this company was actually hired by the lender
Right.
to do assessment.
Yeah. Well, same as this. Yeah. So you, you're subject to your lender selections as well. I mean, you have or your clients are for sure. And the lenders might not have known to vet appropriately or not. So, yeah, I mean, beware. It could happen. You could get, the lender might have selected the company because they were the cheapest. And the cheapest isn't always the best.
As agents, though, it doesn't hurt for us to have a line on somebody that's good at doing it
Mhm.
and know a little bit about the history of others that may be bad, because ultimately we're responsible to our client
Mhm.
as much as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're relying on you for their investment. They're making investment choices and they're relying on, somewhat on you and I don't, who knows what the perspective might be when they decide to sell the property and they come to find out, oops,
Well-
I need an alternative now.
Well, one of the whole reason we met you, I mean,
Mhm.
we had dealt with Phase in its previous existence. But when we hooked up with you was to have you do an evaluation on a report that had been done by a different company.
Mhm.
And they were completely wrong,
Right.
completely wrong.
Mhm.
So I would strongly recommend if you get a phase one, whether it's recommending to go for a phase two or whether they're saying no, it's clean, and you have any concern with regard to the property at all, get in touch with Ross. Yes, your client will pay a fee for his expertise, but I can promise you in our situation, when he did the evaluation, it saved a $2 million transaction because he was able to say, look, this guy, not only did they know who the inspector was and called his integrity into question, but he was able to go back. Ross is tenacious. Okay. I'm
That's a
telling
way
you,
to say it.
he is a pit bull. And when he gets something in his teeth, he goes all the way back, as far back as he can find documentation to either support or deny what's there. Because the lender used somebody else.
Yep.
It wasn't our choice, but he was able to come back and the lender wound up backing off and saying, okay, based on it, we had to get the president of the other company involved. And he finally acquiesced and said, he's right. We're wrong. It's good. So I'm telling you, the man knows what he's talking about. If you have a question, you got to call him.
I just want to add one little thing to that. I know, Philippe, this is for sales purposes. If you do that for a client, you probably keep that client on lots of other deals when we're in commercial anyway.
We're representing the same seller on another transaction now.
Right. Yeah. They don't like to stomach the idea that there could be a concern, but you don't see any return on that as far as you don't see any material return on that. You don't get anything from digging a hole. But yeah, you protect them, move on, keep the road as smooth as possible. But anyway, this is one that I don't feel bad about calling out. This is not, I don't really consider this as a peer. They just decided to package a report, say it's a phase one. Well, these guys aren't. They're in Sugarland. Yeah, then this is the certificate of the course that they took supposedly. This is someone's house. And Doug Samford used to be a consultant. he decided he didn't want to do phase ones anymore, so he would just sell these certificates. So, and I don't even know if this one was purchased. I mean, you could have doctored it up, but either way, not related to the discussion we're talking about, but who should consider hiring. The EPA and the market, the industry has designations for who an environmental professional is. It's either someone with 3 years of relevant experience and either a professional engineer license or a professional geoscientist license. Someone with 5 years relevant experience in environmental evaluations and a degree in something related to environmental or engineering sciences, or someone with 10 years related experience with no degree. So one or the other. ASTM, who's the consensus group to develop phase ones. EPA's backed ASTM to come up with the phase one assessment to support all appropriate inquiry, which is the liability protections you get from getting a phase one. We're currently developing a test and accreditation for environmental professionals. We just haven't finished up. We're in the beta phase of that testing. So by next year, there will be accreditation out there. So yeah, hopefully we get it done. There's a 75 people that are arguing in which question should be included. So it's not always the easiest road up to get over. But either way, I don't know how much time left. I only scratched the surface of what I wanted to, but I will forward this list of hyperlinks. I wish I could show you how to use it. Maybe I'll do that next time if I'm invited, but
You just opened the door for next time. Busted.
but
Good deal.
yeah. So but at least these are the links that you can get into. I don't believe any of them require a login, but they're all public domain. So so if you ever just curious or seeking out some information without going through the Google pit and going down that rabbit hole, they'll direct you to the right place to look for some information.
Okay, now here's your homework for next time. Get certified with Trek so that next time we can do this as a CE course.
We were just talking about that. Yeah, we were just talking about
Okay.
that. Yeah.
So, and I will help.
Okay.
Whatever you need, I will help.
Absolutely.
This is invaluable,
Yeah.
especially something like this if they're taught how to use it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay. Well,
And I think we're right at 4:56, the end of the day. Do y'all have any questions for Ross? Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
If you have any questions, yes, my name is Marco Grasconio. I'm the business development manager of Bays. So please contact me and I'll relay it to Ross.
I didn't get a brochure. You don't like me. The wine. So no questions? All right.
Thank you very much. No, thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Yeah. I tell you what, do me a favor, folks. Some of you,
Clara?
I don't know if I have like your email address. Do me a favor. If you will text me or email me, okay? And it's claramaddox@kwcec.com. Yes.
Can we get an email of the list of the links?
Yeah, he's gonna send that to us. Okay,
Okay.
and
I'll
I'll
send it
make
to you.
sure it's distributed, okay?
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So if you will please, if you don't know that I've already sent you something, send me, okay, your contact information, your email address that you attended today. Okay, claramaddox@kwcec.com, and I will make sure that you get a copy of this. Okay. I'll also send out this, we record all of our trainings. So this is also recorded, but it's restricted to interior use. But I'll send you a link to the site where it'll be posted, okay?
Great.
And I'll even send you a link. Okay,
Excellent. Thank
works,
you.
folks. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. Ross.